Hello, everyone, and welcome to night one of the 9th Annual Equine Industry Symposium, Cracking the Code. While we wait for other participants to join, we invite you to go to menti.com and enter the code on the screen, scan the QR code, or click the link in the chat to tell us where you are joining us from this evening. We will check the results in a couple of minutes. It looks like we have a lot of people from America and a couple of people from overseas. Our next question is, what word comes to mind when you hear Equine Code of Practice? Wow, there's a lot of different answers that came up for this question, with welfare being the main one, so that's great. Now let's get started. In every corner of the horse industry, from owners to trainers to competitors, we face both daily challenges and long-term responsibilities that often demand our immediate focus. But beneath those individual tasks lies a shared mission, the welfare of the horse and the long-term growth of our industry. The Equine Industry Symposium was created to allow us to come together from all sectors to discuss how we can address these challenges, build better standards, and lead the way in shaping a brighter future for both the horse and our industry. It's about collaboration, innovation, and finding collective solutions to ensure we thrive together. Each year, we focus on a different theme of importance, and given that this year marks the start of the updating process for the Equine Code of Practice, our theme of cracking the code is particularly fitting. This symposium is hosted by the University of Guelph's Bachelor of Bioresource Management Equine Management students as part of their second year Equine Event Management class. The BBRM Equine Management major is the first and only program of its kind in Canada, and it combines equine science and business management into one program. Also offered in a co-op format, students have the opportunity to learn through experiential, hands-on learning that equips them for diverse careers. First, I would like to say a big thank you to our sponsors who make this symposium possible: Ontario Equestrian, Equine Guelph, Mad Barn, and Schleese Saddlery. Stay till the end to enter for a chance to win a free Schleese Saddlery saddle fitting, a code for a free Equine Guelph course, and a gift with purchase from Mad Barn. This evening, we will focus on cracking the code, what's in it for you and your horse, through presentations by Jackie Wepruk and Jeffery Spooner from the National Farm Animal Care Council, and then you will hear about some educational opportunities pertaining to equine welfare. Q&A sessions will be held after each speaker, and we will have a short period of time to answer any questions at the very end. As mentioned earlier, you will get the chance to enter to win a free saddle fitting through Schleese Saddlery and a free Equine Guelph course, so stay tuned for that. Francis Habile will be our moderator for the night. Francis is a food and flower grower in Mississauga, Ontario, and he is currently completing a Master's of Science in Capacity Development and Extension at the University of Guelph. He's moderating for us tonight because a focus of his program is to facilitate knowledge mobilization throughout the community, which relates to one of the symposium's goals. Francis, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Annabelle. Hello, everyone. This evening, we welcome Jackie Wepruk and Dr. Jeffery Spooner. Jackie is a Division Director of the National Farm Animal Care Council. In this role, she empowers council members and stakeholder partners towards practical solutions to farm animal welfare in domestic and export markets, governments, the Canadian public, and on the farm. Dr. Jeffery Spooner is an animal scientist who focuses on social scientific research. As the code manager for the National Farm Animal Care Council, he supports the development of the Code of Practice for the care and handling of equines. Previously, Dr. Spooner led the development of the Council's bison and goat codes. At the end of each of their presentations, we will have an opportunity to ask questions. Please input your questions into the chat box. We welcome both of you and look forward to your presentation.
Just want to understand from this audience, and I love the word cloud, where the word welfare was right in the center and was the biggest word out that was being used, and many other high-ranking words that also are reflective of the codes of practice. So we're going to start with a question. Just prior to this symposium, were you aware that an equine code of practice existed? And have you read any portion of the equine code? 26 are aware that an equine code of practice existed. 16 0 said they were not aware that a code. That's fantastic. So everyone is aware of the code of practice, or was afraid to admit that they weren't aware of it. But that's great to hear that so many are aware of it. 16 have read. read the code. Presentation outline. We're going to introduce codes of practice very briefly. I have an overview of the codes that are being updated or amended, so very quickly, so that you can see, the context for a number of codes being updated. Why do codes matter? Hopefully this is going to be relevant for you. Diving into the Equine Code update, which is where Jeff is going to take over from my presentation. From my presenting to him will happen on slide 24. And then looking forward and staying informed, how you can stay informed of the code's update as we go forward. You're aware that the code existed, maybe you haven't read it, it's this vague thing. What are the codes of practice? They really serve as our national understanding around farm animal care requirements and recommended practices. And we're aiming to find that tricky balance between what the science says on farm animal welfare, what is practically possible on farms across Canada. So codes are generally speaking, codes are not niche products. They are meant for a broad audience. They have to be applicable across the country. And then we're always looking to reflect the ever-evolving societal expectations for responsible farm animal care. And codes themselves have a very heavy role to play. So they are used as extension tools. So they are used in a number of universities and colleges and through industry training courses that you're going to hear a little bit about tonight as well, to inform people and help people understand in terms of their responsibilities for the animals under their care. They also form the foundation for animal care assessment programs, and they are increasingly used as reference materials within provincial animal protection legislation. Overall history of the codes. We've had codes of practice in Canada since the early 80s. So probably before some of you may have been even born. We've had codes in Canada for a very long time. You'll notice that the first equine code was developed in 1998, and it was developed through an organization called the Canadian Agri-Food Research Council. That organization no longer exists. When NFACC, the National Farm Animal Care Council, became an entity and came on the scene, we are all the codes in orange. So it started with the Dairy Code in 2009, and then you can see 2015 equine was part of a large number of codes that were updated or developed at that point in time. And now in 2023, we've initiated a new code, another code update. How many codes of practice have been developed through the National Farm Animal Care Council? And it's a bit of a trick question. I'll let you know that it's a bit of a trick question. All right, so 17 of you said 14. The right answer is 14. So congratulations for those that got that one right. Now, it's a trick question because these are all the codes that have been completed through the National Farm Care Council since 2009. And it's a bit of a trick question because 14 codes have been developed, but if you count all the codes on this slide, it adds up to 15. And that's because dairy started it off in 2009, and they did their code update and had a new code released in 2023. So only count them once, but you could have been correct if you had said 15, but actually that wasn't one of the options anyway. All right, so with all of those codes that were updated, Equine as one of them, you can see all these codes. Actually, I'll go back to this previous slide. So you can see all those codes that were developed. Several of them came out in and around that same time. You saw that list of long, that Equine was a part of several codes that were released in 2013. And most of those codes are now undergoing another update. So the message here is that the equine sector is in very good company in terms of being part of the code update process. There are several other groups that have also initiated their code updates, and this is all part of one big project called Promoting Sustainable Animal Welfare Advances Through Codes of Practice. And so you've got the beef cattle code, the sheep, equine, pigs, and then the hatching eggs, breeders, chickens, and turkeys code that are being fully updated. And then one code, the layer code, which was released in 2017, that is undergoing an amendment. So it's a smaller scope in terms of the updates that are happening on that code. So you're part of a family of code updates. Next question is, who do the codes apply to? So are codes of practice related to commercial business operators, so ranchers, feedlots, boarding facilities? Are we focused on trainers, particularly when we're talking about the equine code? Are we talking about owners and principal caregivers? These are type of animal covered by a code. Or is it all of the above? It is all of the above. Codes apply to anyone who is connected with the equine industry. If you're caring for horses, whether you're part of a commercial business, whether you're a trainer, whether you're the owner or a principal caregiver, the code applies to everyone. And codes are made up of usually we have a preamble, and then really critical piece of the code that we highlight are all the requirements. And so every code has requirements listed within each section. This is an example from the facilities and housing section of the Equine Code. And requirements are defined as they're either something that's already a regulatory requirement, or they are an industry imposed expectation outlining acceptable and unacceptable practices. These are considered fundamental obligations for animal care, kind of the non-negotiables. These are the things that we all should be doing if we have this type of animal under our care, and that these are the things that need to be implemented by all persons responsible for that animal's care. They can be part of an assessment program. So for some sectors, assessment programs are mandatory, and so to not adhere to your requirement may mean that you fail your animal care program. And then, as I mentioned earlier, they may be enforced under legislation if a code is usually it's if code requirements can be used as evidence if an offense has occurred or not. And so if you're following your code, you've really secured it's really an insurance policy against someone else's standards being used someone else's standards being used as the judgment. Recommended practices, they come below the codes, or sorry, below the requirements in a code. They may complement the code's requirements. They generally are promoting education. They encourage adoption of practices for continuous improvement on animal welfare outcomes. And they're generally expected to enhance animal welfare, but not implementing them does not imply that acceptable standard of care are not met. So they sometimes they're seeds being planted for a future code update, things that maybe aren't possible now, but with additional support, technological advances may become requirements down the road. So I've given a few clues here in terms of how requirements within codes might be enforced. So you've got your choices there, and I'll put up the question. So are they entirely voluntary? Are they enforced through animal care programs, through prevention overreaction legislation, or B and C, which is animal care programs and provincial animal protection legislation? Majority of you said B and C, so via animal care programs or through provincial animal protection legislation. And that's right. So codes are often referred to publicly, groups as saying, well, they're just voluntary, they don't matter. The reality is that, well, certainly they're not mandatory. They are in this gray zone where they are neither voluntary nor completely mandatory, because for many codes, they can be mandatory through animal care programs. And then certainly provincial animal protection legislation referencing the codes gives them a little bit more than a voluntary status. So it is important to pay attention to your code, pay attention to what's happening in the code's development, and this is really an invitation to make sure that you are aware and informed so that you can be as involved as possible. And because the codes play that huge role, they are central to how we deal with animal welfare, farm animal welfare in Canada, it's really important that the process by which they are developed is a good process where everyone has a say. So collaboration, credibility, and commitment, and the whole code process is uniquely collaborative in terms of the breadth of stakeholders that come together to develop a code. And the various pieces of the code process that come together to ensure that credibility, scientific committee, to the diversity of the code development committee, to the progress reports that we continually put out on how a code's update is progressing, to the public comment period that you're going to hear more about. All of this is about ensuring that credibility and transparency through scientific rigor, stakeholder collaboration, and a consistent approach. And definitely stakeholder commitment is key to ensuring that we have quality and care standards in place. We need to hear from everyone, and we want to ensure that the codes, each of the codes that are developed, are the best that they can be. And so that's why an opportunity like this to speak to the Equine Industry Symposium and all of you is really important to make sure that everyone is aware of what's happening on the code, where it's at, and how you can be involved. All right, so next question is, how do we go about deciding that a code update is going to happen? Who decides that a code is going to be initiated? Do we do this through a change.org petition? Does the government decide? Does NFACC itself decide? Or does the national industry lead submit a request? The answer is the national industry lead submits a request. So, and this is really an important piece of the whole process, is to having the national industry lead submit that request, because it is the industry that ultimately needs to champion its code. And in the case of the Equine Code, it was Equestrian Canada that initiated the update to this code. And so it's really important, because we need to have that national industry lead and national industry champion for a code to ensure the best opportunity for the code to be widely read, widely understood, and widely accepted.
All right, well, thank you, Jackie. Hello, everyone. Wow, what a pleasure to be here this evening. I'm going to talk for a bit now in quite specific terms about what has, what is, and what we hope will eventually come to be the update of the existing Code of Practice for the care and handling of equine in Canada. So this is an update that's been underway in earnest for about 9 months now. And I'm going to give you a bit of a quick reset. As Jackie alluded to, this code update began, as all NFACC code updates do, and that's with step 1 of the NFACC code process. As Jackie mentioned, that involved Equestrian Canada submitting a letter of intent to NFACC expressing their desire to initiate a code update. So once we got that letter, and once we on the code team got the green light to launch, several additional steps took place then in short order. First, there was the formation of our code development committee. So that process involved a series of invitations that ultimately went out to 15 stakeholder representatives. So 15 reps were invited to advance the interests of many stakeholders who would collectively be responsible for updating the existing equine code. Now, as I'm sure you can appreciate, the selection of the code committee is a very important task. All the reps are expected to consult, of course, with their constituents throughout the update process, but they are also to be sufficiently empowered and entrusted to meaningfully discuss and deliberate with other code representatives throughout the process, ultimately, of course, in the best interests of the code as a collective effort. So in a moment, then I'm going to introduce you to our panel of distinguished folks that currently comprise our Equine Code Committee. But just before I do that, I'm going to tell you about one other key step that took place as part of our code launch. It was sort of a combined event. And I'm referring here then to the release of the update announcement. Some of you may have received that or saw that earlier this year, along with the launch of our top of mind survey, both of which were made available through the NFACC website in April. So, well, I'm going to talk about the top of mind survey and share with you some of our results in more detail momentarily. I realized as I was building this talk that some of you may have received that announcement or that survey invitation and can perhaps remember asking yourself at the time, what's all this about? So very quickly, as the name implies, the intent of NFACC's top of mind survey is to literally invite top of mind input from a wide range of interested parties or stakeholders or anyone really who want to talk personally about the issues that they regard with regard to, equine welfare as being highest priority. Among other purposes, then the top of mind exercise is intended to provide members, in this case from the equine community or beyond, with an early opportunity to offer input on the update process. And at the same time, that input also served, in our case, as a reminder to the members of our code committee that once the committee was to enter into its relatively long period of confidential communications, that there was and would be throughout the development period, as there is now, many outside parties who also hold a keen interest in the updating exercise. So there are people who will also, of course, be subsequently invited to weigh in on the final version of the code before it's published, but I'll get to that in a moment. And then just as a quick aside, again, on the top of mind, I can tell you that all NFACC top of mind surveys also generate input that we tag, we thematically address throughout the review process, and then later report at the end of the code update in a what we call what we heard document that Jackie will touch on a little bit later. So just to sum up then, a top of mind invite was made available in the spring. Participants engaged and returned their feedback. That feedback was then compiled and shared with the code committee before being made public on the equine webpage of the NFACC website, where you can actually go anytime you would like and have a closer look. So as I mentioned, I'm going to return to all things top of mind in a few minutes, but I hope that may have answered some questions that perhaps some of you may have had if you were involved in that process earlier this spring. But ahead of that, let's have a peek, as promised, then, at the folks who currently comprise the Equine Code Development Committee. Thanks, Jackie. Give you a moment then to look over those names and their respective affiliations. I expect there may be at least a few folks there with whom you are familiar, perhaps a few folks who have even joined us this evening. Now, I also want to take this time to tell you about a second committee that also plays an invaluable role in the development or the update of any code, and that's our Code Scientific Committee. So it's widely accepted at NFACC that codes should take advantage of the best available scientific knowledge to help inform their content. And for that reason, code development efforts always entail a scientific committee. A scientific committee is a body of approximately 6 researchers with expertise in animal welfare research regarding, in our case, equine. Every science committee is tasked with developing a report for the code committee, and in fairly short order by summarizing research on what we popularly refer to as a code's PWIs, or its priority welfare issues. That's another topic that we'll elaborate on in a moment. So in short, then, a science committee develops a report. It's co-authored, and as Jackie mentioned, it's consensually agreed upon by all authors, and that reflects a synthesis of research results that relate to key welfare issues that are jointly agreed to by all scientific and code committee members. Should also note that the report is developed by taking into consideration different perspectives for measuring animal welfare. In other words, biological functioning, affective states, and the ability to express normal or natural behaviors. And once completed, that report is made publicly available on the NFACC website in an effort, again, to further enhance the transparency and the credibility of the updated code process, as is to some degree this presentation this evening. I can see that Jackie's already flipped the slide. So these are the folks here that were invited and then agreed to serve as members of our Equine Scientific Committee. Once again, I'm sure that most of you will be familiar with at least one name there, maybe a few more. You'll also notice that 2 of our members hail as well from the United States. All right, so one of my hopes this evening is to inspire or perhaps to tempt anyone who has never visited the NFACC site to do so. And then once you get there, to click through to the equine page contained within, because that's really where we want you to go if you want to become familiar with all things concerning the Equine Code of Practice. Now, that said, let me touch on a few snippets of what you'll find when you get there in terms of notable activities that pertain to the current code update. Now, before I dive into the present, though, I also want to mention that if you visit the website, you'll also receive information about the development of the current version of the code published in 2013, the same code, the current code, that's still in effect today and that will be in effect until it's eventually supplanted by this new edition once the code is updated. And moreover, once you're there, and if you're inclined, you can also have a look at the previous Science Committee report, along with the results of a 5-year code review that was undertaken and completed in 2018. And so because we have to insist on a lot of confidentiality throughout a code update, the website is really the best place to get a peek at the construction work, if you like, that's currently underway, perhaps not unlike those cutaway viewing holes that construction sites make available on the sides of those safety panels that surround construction sites. All right, so let's get back then to the work of the current Code Committee. Here in a nutshell is an overview of what the Code Committee has been up to since the spring. As you'd expect, updating a code is a very labor-intensive process. Code Committee members invest a lot of time and travel, as well as ongoing communications and deliberations along the way. And I'm going to zero in now on just a few of those activities, give you the results of what the Code Committee has managed to accomplish to date. As I mentioned earlier, one of the first acts, of course, as Jackie mentioned as well, was that we recruited respective Code Committee members. Beyond that, and in addition to a series of initial introductory online and other kinds of meetings, we already managed to bring members of both the science and code committees together for a 2-day face-to-face meeting. And that session was held quite fittingly in the meeting center at the Calgary Stampede in Alberta. We met there in late August, about 2 weeks after the Stampede ended. Now, one of the especially important things we did at that meeting was to establish our working subcommittees. And briefly, that process involved populating 11 teams, yes, 11 teams, each of which was tasked with leading a respective word-by-word, line-by-line review of the current code chapters, one chapter or one section per team. So those review exercises involve very focused deliberations among code members about the current need for prospective edits or updates. And in turn, those discussions, those decisions then give way to broader deliberations involving the entire code committee on an ongoing basis throughout the update process. So we engage the entire code committee every time we meet face-to-face, which coincidentally will happen again next week when the entire code committee reassembles for a few days in Ottawa. So subcommittees then assume a great deal of the heavy lifting associated with the preliminary update process. And looking ahead then, this combined CC review process will continue up until the fall of about 2025, at which time all members of the code committee will be required to pause the update process. Why is that? Well, at that point, the code committee will all come together to compile the updated code content or all updated content to that point. And then in turn, we'll turn everything over in effect to all of you. Once again, we'll be looking for you folks to weigh in if present inclined, but I'll get to that in just a moment. Here's a peek then at the topics of the Equine Subcommittee and what they're working on as we speak. Since we're meeting in Ottawa next week, I can assure you that they are probably working on this right now. As you can see, the Equine Code covers a wide swath of topics. And as Jackie mentioned earlier, each of those code sections entails requirements and recommended practices for responsible care and handling. As Jackie also alluded, code updates are always consensus-based activities, so the final code will not be published until all code committee members are in agreement with all code committee material. I said that. So I understand, thankfully, that it's usually quite a breeze to get most members of the equine community to agree on complex topics involving proper care and handling of equine, because if it wasn't, we might be in for quite an uphill struggle here. I suspect some of you are skeptical. I'm going to circle back now to what I touched on a moment ago, another cornerstone of any code update or development. That's the identification, the agreement, and the work that goes on with regard to our PWIs, our priority welfare issues. You also heard Jackie allude earlier that the codes are not solely scientific based. In other words, we actively invite all kinds of input from code committee members, including anecdotal and experiential based knowledge. At the same time, of course, codes are very much scientifically informed. And that's why at the outset of every code development, we throw our code and our scientific committee members into the deep end right away. We get them to work together on identifying a small number of welfare-related topics that our code committee members define as being of high priority, and our science committee members evaluate and speak to with regard to available literature, among other important considerations. Now, PWIs typically entail up to 6 animal welfare topics that are especially important for the species and that the code committee members feel will particularly benefit their updating efforts. Now, that list is jointly agreed to by the scientific and code committees before research related to these topics is subsequently undertaken. It's synthesized, it's bundled, and it's published eventually as a scientific committee report. Happily, I can tell you that the 2 committees have now successfully completed this exercise. They were able to come to an agreement on the following 4 topic areas. Jackie has it up there already. Okay. So pain recognition, castration, principles in training and learning theory, and young horse development. Now, as you know by now, if you would like to have more detail around each of these, you know where to turn. That's the NFACC website. Click through to the Equine Code. I'll also mention just in passing here that if you have an interest in the field of science policy interface, which I do, or the way in which science and policy development can or should engage in dialogue, I can tell you that the chair of the science committee also serves as a full-fledged member of the code committee. And then in our case, at least, I invite our science committee chair and our research writer to prepare and deliver a summary update on one PWI topic during each of our face-to-face meetings, so that our synthesized research findings can be pre-mixed and baked into the code development process along the way and not after the fact. I can also tell you that once the science committee report is completed, which ours will be on or about May 1st of 2025, the report is sent for peer review. It's then edited, adjusted as required. It's then published, as I mentioned earlier, on the NFACC website. And so as a result, I should probably mention as well that these scientific committee reports and their authors often tend to be invited to present at industry-related meetings and conferences over the year after publication. So that may be something for you to keep in mind, perhaps, if any of you here this evening might be involved with equine-related conference planning going forward. Right, so at this point, I want to return then and share with you some high-level results from the aforementioned top-of-mind survey that we ran earlier this spring. Once again, I'm not sure how many of you may have had a chance to weigh in that way, but NFACC did receive nearly 5,000 welfare-related comments from participants. In keeping with the international theme, I can also tell you that we had comments not just from Canadians and Americans, but we got comments from Australia, Cyprus, France, Hungary, Luxembourg, Scotland, Sweden, and the United Kingdom. And then just to reiterate once more that while the top-of-mind exercise is really intended to serve as more of a check-in perhaps than a formal survey, it's a very important part of the code development process. Not only does it hopefully serve to alert members throughout the sector or the community that a code update's been launched, it serves to provide code committee members with a general sense of what community members are thinking most about welfare-wise as the code committee begins its deliberations. All right, so what equine welfare-related topic areas were top of mind among our survey participants this spring? Well, here they are. Now, as I said, even though this is not a formally controlled research survey by any means, we did manage to capture a fair amount of interesting feedback from participants, as I mentioned, who hailed from many geographic and demographic quarters of the equine sector and beyond. And that's another reason why I would especially encourage you to visit the website for a deeper drilling down into what we heard. Just before I think I turn now to what I think is going to be my most important slide this evening, I want to give you a sense of where the code committee is at in terms of the sequential steps of the update process, just in case any of you pop onto the website and try to figure this out for yourself. It's important to keep in mind that once the PWIs are agreed on, the code committee and science committee begin to work in parallel, albeit with the science committee weaving in and out of our code meetings by providing regular updates. The code committee, of course, itself continues to work diligently on welfare-related topics that may have been identified as being important, but for any number of reasons were not PWIs. So technically, at least, here's where we're at. Next slide, please. We're about there, right? So both committees are knee-deep and hard at it. In terms of some timelines, and as I mentioned, the code committee will all come together next week, and then again in the spring, we'll come together one more time next summer. And by that time, it'll be up to the code committee to have compiled a draft version of the final code with what I call at least a finger-tight consensus in place, at which time the draft update will be handed over to NFACC in advance of the next crucial step in the development process. And that brings me to my most important slide tonight, the part where all of you come in. This is the 60-day public comment period. Thank you, Jackie. So I hope that you've already taken away at least a couple of key points this evening, mainly that the code process is very thorough. It involves a great deal of work and support from a lot of dedicated people, and that for obvious reasons, it usually takes 2.5, maybe even 3 years to complete. So we follow, or we try to, a very well-honed recipe. But like all recipes, the evaluative proof is always in the pudding. So it's important to ask ourselves, what are all these updating efforts going to get us in the end? I mean, is the new code going to be everything that everyone hopes it can or should be? Well, I'm happy to say that some of that will be up to you. Beginning at or around the outset of January 2025, so in just a little over a year, the draft code will be shared with interested members of the equine world and beyond, offering anyone who might like an opportunity to conduct a careful review of the collective efforts of the code committee so far. So this is where NFACC turns again to those interested members of the community who remain outside the room during deliberations to invite them to weigh in and to review the code, and in the process to effectively address three main questions. What, if anything, has the code committee missed so far? What, if anything, should we do about that, and why? Now, to the code committee, this input is of critical importance. Having served as a code manager on a few code developments over the years, I can assure you that code committees take public input very seriously. We absolutely rely on the external input of others to finalize as viable, as manageable, as comprehensively balanced a set of requisite care and handling standards as possible. I think that it's also quite accurate to say that every code committee invariably makes anywhere from some to many tweaks or reworkings following its public comment period and prior to finalization. And to that end, just to help put things into perspective, if you'd like some tangible sense of the importance that NFACC attaches to the public comment period, each code committee is allotted 4 face-to-face meetings to completely update or to develop a new code. That same code committee is then allotted 2 separate face-to-face meetings thereafter solely to address public feedback. So a third of the time again. So I'm going to encourage you then to jot down that January public comment period launch date straight away. Also along the way to check out the Equine website. Among other things, we'll be providing quarterly progress updates for you to keep tabs on there as well. And so in closing, I want to thank all of you again for the opportunity to provide this update. I also want to mention one other person with whom I know some of you here are acquainted, and that is a former graduate of yours, Dr. Cordy Dubois. Cordy is serving as our assistant code manager on this program. And on behalf of myself and the rest of the code committee, we are utterly indebted to Cordy, both for assuming this role and for serving as the NFACC research writer as well. So I think that's about going to do it for me. In a minute, I'm going to turn things over to Jackie again, but just immediately in advance, I want to suggest that if you have any questions, would like to reach out to me for any reason whatsoever, please do so. I'm pretty easy to find. Either a note to NFACC or a note to your organizing team here this evening should get that done.
So just to give you a bit of the history of the comment periods that have been hosted by the National Farm Animal Care Council, you can see that there's quite a lot of variability between different codes. Some have, quite a small amount of input. Some, like the pig code in 2013 and the dairy code that straddled 21 and 2022, those were our really super busy public comment periods. And let's find where equine is. Equine was not a huge amount in 2012, 2013. I expect that we'll probably get a little more feedback this time around, but you can see there is a lot of variability in the public comment in terms of the feedback that we do receive. And Jeff talked about, after this long process that can take this 2.5 to 3 years, we're always hoping that we can get it done a little sooner, but that rarely is the case. Once the code committee has sifted through all the public comments that have been received, and it's arrived at a consensus that has addressed the feedback and is satisfied that where they've landed with this code has really met the bar for what's possible, when it's possible, and how it's possible for equine welfare. The final publication happens. So once the code committee has achieved their consensus, they hand that final code over to the National Farm Animal Care Council. This is an example of the most recent code that was released that I mentioned earlier, the dairy cattle code. That will be kind of look and feel of kind of generation 2 codes developed through the National Farm Animal Care Council. And then what accompanies that code is, given all the efforts that people had made through the public comment period to offer their feedback, we also produce a what we heard and how we addressed it report that is released and at the same time as the final code to let people know, what impact did that public comment period have? Where what were some of the main considerations that were made? How was the code changed as a result? And maybe even, why it may not have changed as a result of some comments. So, what we heard and how we addressed the report is also important. The transparency effort to ensure that people are kept informed of what happened behind the scenes on that code's update. And as Jeff mentioned, the NFACC website has a lot of information on it. So if you are looking for specific information on what's going on with this code, you can go to the NFACC website, nfac.ca. You can source information on the current equine code and related documents from the 2013 code. You'll get information on the code's update. So there's just a bit of a snippet there of what that page looks like, and everything that we provide progress reports there as well. So you can always check in as you desire to see where's this code at. And if you want to have more, if you want to be informed without having to check on your own, you can always subscribe to NFACC information updates. We put them out roughly on a quarterly basis. And particularly when codes are being updated, every quarter you will get an update on each code that is being updated. So every quarter you will get an update on the progress that's been made on the equine code. And then those progress updates are also put on the website, on the equine code's webpage. So at the end, they tell a story from start to finish about the whole progress of that code's development and finalization. Please feel free to subscribe to NFACC information updates. We don't bog you down with junk emails or anything like that. You will just get updates in the language of your choice. And it's a good way to stay on top of what's happening, and that date of January. If anything changes on the public comment period timelines, if they get moved up or if they're a little bit delayed, you will find out through an NFACC information update. We do try to keep everyone informed of the progress that's being made on each code. And so with that, thank you for listening. And I see there's quite a list of questions seem to have arisen through our presentation. So I'll stop sharing maybe, and then can see people on screen and answer any questions that Jeff and I can answer any questions that you guys may have.
Thank you for your presentations, Jackie and Dr. Spooner. We have collected some questions from the chat. The first one is, who decides who is on the code committee, and can anyone from the public make suggestions?
Great question. So how the code committee is populated, if you go to NFACC's website and you click on the codes of practice, there's a link for the code process. And the code process outlines the category of people, categories that need to be represented on each code committee. So there has to be a welfare representative, there has to be a veterinarian, there has to be industry representation. And so typically we go to the national lead associations for representation. So if we're looking for veterinary representation, we go to the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association. We have two animal welfare organizations that are affiliated with NFACC, World Animal Protection and Humane Canada. So we go to them to source the welfare representative, and it will be Equestrian Canada that will largely was responsible for going to each of these national entities and requesting representation. And it is an agreement between the national industry lead and those representative bodies to select a representative that has the expertise and the background that is needed to support the code's development and update.
Yeah. Thank you. Our next question is, what was the issue that made Equine Canada push for a code update?
Well, that might be a question for Equestrian Canada, actually. But actually, we have a process at Canada at NFACC where the codes are expected to be reviewed every 5 years and updated. The update should start at least at that 10-year mark. So Equestrian Canada, they are a member of the National Farm Animal Care Council. They went through their 5-year review in 2018, and then at at that point, when a 5-year review is undertaken, a code can be the word is escaping me now, reaffirmed, or their amendments can be requested, or a full update can even be requested at that 5-year mark. The code at the 5-year, the Equine Code at the 5-year mark was reaffirmed with an understanding that the intent would be to update it at 10 years of age. So really, I don't think there was any major this is, we must do this because we're getting this pressure. It was part of being just being responsible and following the process and recognizing that, after 10 years, issues do evolve and change, and that it's always time to reopen the code and then consider what needs to be edited, updated, informed by new science, etc.
So when the code updates, is there any support for farm owners to also upgrade their facilities if necessary?
Well, that is beyond the National Farm Animal Care Council's wheelhouse. We oversee the process by which codes are developed, but I think that question maybe is asking whether government gets involved with supports, and that is likely a question for provincial and federal governments in terms of any supports that they may provide for facility upgrades or supports that they might provide to farmers for updates.
The next question is, will the scientific committee consider published research from other countries when they are writing the scientific reports for the priority welfare issues?
Yes. Yes, they do. And as Jeff had mentioned, we have, this is not the only code where this has happened. It's not just Canadian researchers that are sitting on scientific committees. There are two, Jeff, am I got that right? Two
Yes.
US-based researchers. And on other codes, we had on the goat code, we had someone from New Zealand that sat on the goat code scientific committee. So for sure, we both involve international research expertise. And of course, we look at international research as well. Of course, we do have to look at the Canadian context. So the Canadian context is very important. But if there's international studies that can inform the code's development, absolutely.
And I would just add to that we go far and wide in search of other codes of practice and other standards internationally. So we very deliberately try to draw on everybody else's work, bring that into conversation with our group as well.
Yeah, and it might also be worth mentioning that the scientific committee reports are peer reviewed before they are published. So they are, and often that peer review process may also pull in international expertise to do the review as well.
Our next question is, all of us are on this call are aware of the code, but I don't get the sense that that's the case for the general public. How do we get the word out that the code exists and encourage people to read it? Is there a public communication strategy?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And maybe the eternal question is how to reach everyone, especially if they're not linked into their national group, or they're not involved in their sector in a really deep way. It is the eternal question, and often that is the question that we direct to our industry leads, and so NFACC, again, like, we own the process by which the codes are developed. Once the code is done, we do everything we can to reach out to people to participate. Things like this symposium to make everyone aware this code is being updated. Here's your chance to have input. This is how the process works. All of that is really, really important. And then we also do put a lot of the heavy burden on the industry, the national industry lead, to then take that code once it's out there and find creative ways to get it into the hands of people who might not otherwise be aware.
So with the code of practice currently being updated, Could we expect a section about suggested practices regarding environmental sustainability?
Well, I might ask Jeff to see to what extent that I mean, this is a code about animal welfare, but I don't know to what extent the code committee has had that type of conversation even.
That's probably a kind of wait to see sort of question at this point as we continue to deliberate. You know, we're still fairly new in the process. I can tell you that in the last round of codes, we introduced a section called emergency management planning, and we certainly got into a lot of environmental related issues in that conversation, and I expect we'll see more of those. So we don't dedicate an area or a section or a chapter to that, but conversationally, I would expect it would be very hard to not engage that way before we are done. Again, it's still somewhat early days for us.
Thank you. Our next question is, are there any particular international welfare models or countries whose equine welfare standards Canada should be looking to emulate or learn from when considering updating the code?
So I'm going to take one part of that question, and then I'm going to jump out. So a little biased here, but I think that we have a preeminent process in Canada for how we develop codes of practice. We are the only country in the world that invites such a diverse range of perspectives on farm animal welfare to come together and deliberate and achieve consensus. Unheard of. Farmers sitting down with welfare advocates, with veterinarians, with government, with processors, with just a whole array of stakeholders to arrive at consensus. That's why it takes as long as it does to develop the code. So our process is without question a gold standard process that I think we are the ones to be looked at from around the world. That said, one of the things that we definitely do not ignore what's going on around the world, and so Jeff can certainly speak to the other standards that might be looked at.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. I've touched on that a moment ago, but I'll add something further. So we absolutely go shopping. We go everywhere we possibly can to find current care handling protocols wherever they might be. I've got a fair amount of experience of working internationally in standards development. Before I came to agriculture, I was in human medicine, and we did the same kind of work there for many, many years. And one of the things you always have to do is you have to sort of assimilate what you find elsewhere into your own culture. And so invariably we have to try to find a fit between what it is others are doing, what they've been doing for how long and why, and how that aligns with the folks in Canada who are developing. So we absolutely go looking. We try to tailor it as much as we can and incorporate where relevant.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Jackie and Dr. Spooner, for answering our questions. Up next, we have some educational opportunities presented by Gayle Ecker, Mikki Shatosky, and Cristina Wilkins. First, we're going to have Gayle Ecker. Gayle is the director of Equine Guelph, a welfare educator and associate faculty of the Campbell Center for the Study of Animal Welfare.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm very pleased to be here. So thank you for this invitation and the opportunity to talk to all of you tonight. So just a bit of background, Equine Guelph is the Center for the Horse Owner at the University of Guelph, and our goal is to educate about health, welfare, and safety. And we do this in a variety of ways, and I'll be focusing on one of them tonight, which is courses on the horse portal. So you can go to the horse portal and see all of the different courses that we offer. But basically, when the Code of Practice was under development, and certainly once it was released, we realized that a lot of people in the industry had never heard of a Code of Practice, didn't know what it was, had no idea what it might contain. And so we very quickly responded to that and created a course, which initially we called it the Code of Practice, but that wasn't sexy enough. So we changed the name to Care and Welfare. And I'm going to take you into that course and I'll let you just take a peek. So essentially, we created this course immediately after the 2013 release. And we also made a lot of presentations at different meetings, at trade shows, and we got hard copies to distribute out to our horse public because, again, we realized this was not something that many people knew about. So we created the horse care and welfare course. And so this is a course that basically is offered once a year. It is facilitated. So it's either Dr. Nicole Wiedner or myself. And we've got a couple of things that we put into this course, which I think are really, really important. The facilitator is part of that so that people can ask questions about the code, understand not only the how, but the why. And so that's one of the things that we make sure that we put into that. So it's sort of a fun way to learn about the code. Sitting down and reading the code cover to cover is something that a lot of people don't want to do. It takes a dedication to get through it. And so what we wanted to do was use this course on the horse portal to try and have a fun way of doing it and to be part of a learning community as they're going along. So as they go through this course, basically you're going to take a look at every sector or every chapter rather of the course. So you can see who the course is, it might be interested in. So anyone from the horse industry, implementing horse care practices. In particular, we do try and attract new horse owners or those who are thinking of getting a horse and having the care of it for themselves. Any employers that are wanting to take a look at their facilities. And so what we do is we offer this course and there's two of them that we put together now, the standards as well as the welfare code, and we can actually give them a certificate from Equine Guelph at the University of Guelph. So when they go into that, they basically will take a look at each chapter of the code. So you can see the unit day 1, there's 2 weeks is the course, and each week we take a look at 5 sections. So every one of these goes into what is the duty of care. We talk about the cost of ownership. So we can go in and just take a look at, see if that's working, which it doesn't seem to be doing here. There it goes. Yeah. So we introduce this in a fun manner. You can see we've got discussions going on here. There's the introduction to the topic. There's an audio tape here so that they can listen to it as well. And then we have learning activities. We have discussions with people. And then we have different resources. So Equine Guelph's got a whole lot of extra resources here. And so we put that out for all of the people taking this course to take a look at. We want them to learn about the cost of ownership as well as all the other aspects. So you can see here that there's lots of different activities, videos, discussions, extra resources, some readings. We have summary sections, quizzes so that they can test their own knowledge. And so lots of different ways that they can go through this course and learn about each of those units. Upon completion of that course, they do get a certificate of completion. And as I said, they can combine that with biosecurity. The discussions, in my opinion, are one of the most important parts of this course, because we do get people asking us, how do I do it in my situation? Or I've been told, or why would we do it that way? And it is a super way that we can actually have that two-way conversation with the students. The other thing, the question was asked, how is this code of practice being pushed out there? You know, what awareness program is out there? And so Equine Guelph has done their own awareness program. We do a lot through our social media. We do a lot through our other courses. So Equine Guelph has 12-week courses that are certificate or diploma courses from the University of Guelph. We partner with the Office of Open Ed. So those are online courses. And in the nutrition, the welfare, the equine industry, the management, stewardship of the equine environment, in all of those courses, the Code of Practice does feature as one of the central tools. So there is a lot that we are doing to push that code out, because again, we found out, yes, a lot of horse owners, even today, a lot of horse owners are still not aware of the code, or if they have, it's basically a passing knowledge of it and they really haven't gone into it. So we try and do that as much as possible to make it easy for them to learn about the code in a guided environment as part of a learning community. So as I said, we encourage students to join this. The cost of that course is about $75 or something, but we do have partners that are on our portal. So all of the equestrian federations do get a reduction, and we do have some other partners as well that can get a reduction on that. And so that's one of the big things that we're really trying to push that out. And when we do the course, we also try and encourage them to consider themselves as always the student. That's one of our favorite phrases for horse owners. And so start here with the care and welfare, and then we try and encourage them to go into other courses like the colic risk management, in respiratory issues, lameness prevention, lots of other different courses that we offer on the horse portal now. So it is a big part of our program. We're very committed to doing it. When the new code comes out, we will be right on top of that to make sure that our code of practice course is in fact updated and reflecting what's new in the code. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and happy to answer any questions either online, or you can always reach me at gecker@UO Guelph as well.
Perfect. Thank you for that information, Gayle. We'll be sure to check out that online course. Next up, we have Mikki Shatosky presenting our second educational opportunity. Mikki is an animal health and welfare consultant. She is the executive director and project manager of the Horse Welfare Alliance of Canada.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity and the invitation to speak on behalf of the Horse Welfare Alliance of Canada. We work with Equestrian Canada. They are the national body that's representing equine sport in Canada. The Horse Welfare Alliance represents more of the industry, so breed organizations, ranching, rodeo, feedlots, recreation owners, pharmaceuticals. But we do strive to collaborate with EC on projects to ensure representation for the entire equine industry. And we are working hard to get the code out. ATRAC is committed to collaborating with industry to ensure that all resources and training programs remain in line with the latest industry standards and the best practices. So as you know, like our challenge is really, and we've discussed this already, is getting the code out, reaching our audience. Because the equine audience stems, like they're so diversified. When you think of all the different livestock groups, equine is the one that's harder to reach. And so just because of the diversity of the industry and the ownership structures of the industry. So we've long recognized that there are issues with insufficient awareness, education, and implementation of the code. As proof of that, we did two surveys, or we reviewed two surveys. One was done in 2017 by HWAC, where we had 2,800 people respond to a survey, and only 48% of them knew what the code was. And then we also referenced a survey that was done by Equine Guelph in Ontario, where they did some work with 26 equine operations, and that revealed that only 50% of the people were aware of the code as well. So these surveys also provided valuable feedback on the challenges faced by those who are referencing the codes. I am just going to see if I can flip over to our website here. So on here shows our training program, and this is horsewelfare.ca. And so we have also developed an online course, just like Equine Guelph has done. Ours is on demand, and so you can just come in and take it whenever you're ready to take the course. You just click on right here. We'll tell you it's $25 to go through the course, and that's so that you can get certification. All the sections of the code are in each of the modules, and so you can go through all those. Once you do a little exam, then you can get your certification of completion. Then you can also go down. We took out all the appendices and made them standalone documents, and then questions on the code. And the program is also available through our YouTube channel. Down here, you can just see all the people that were involved in our training or in the development of the course. And then you can also go through the course as well on our YouTube channel there. So some of the things that we found were issues with the code when we did our surveys was the transportation section. A significant number of the respondents indicated that they didn't understand the animal welfare regulations that apply to them. And to be clear, everyone responsible for transporting animals, including horses, must comply by the Canadian Animal Transport Regulations. And so we brought that out a bit more in the training. Another concern was horse owners and caregivers frequently express difficulty and misunderstanding comprehends like the content of the code and how to how to apply and be in compliance with the requirements that are within the code. And I think that's also why Equine Guelph developed their program, just to help people understand how the requirements apply to them. And then again, the majority of people don't understand that the codes actually apply to them. So the goal of our online program here was to create an educational program for horse enthusiasts and the public focused on the code and how owners and caregivers can better comply to the regulation or to the requirements within. Industry involvement was key to the development of the course. We recorded over 400 hours of industry time and visited over 50 locations for video production, photography, and interviews. And through this approach, we worked with over 250 equine owners, caregivers, veterinarians, and other service providers across Canada. So in the training, we cover every section of the code. Each module includes a background information and a review of the requirements and guidance on how to determine and achieve compliance within. We also built out areas respecting body condition scoring, biosecurity, and emergency preparedness. So you'll find that all on the page there that is showing on the screen. And as I said earlier, we extracted the code appendices and made them all available. We also developed self-evaluation equine care assessments for on-farm rescue facilities, boarding facilities, and any other place that horses are. The assessments are designed so owners and caregivers can evaluate, improve and manage the welfare of the equine in their care. And then this program was launched at industry events, meetings, workshops across the country, where we collected feedback. And so we were able to improve on the training and bring out areas where people were particularly struggling on. And we also identified some additional areas for resource and training that are needed. Some of that information is being brought back by our team to the revisions to the code that are now happening. And so we do have representation on the code update committee. So as the program has remained popular, over 9,000 people now have gone through the online training. I think it'd be interesting if we could do another survey and even talk to those 2,800 people that responded to our initial survey, just to see where they're at on understanding that we do have a code of practice and how it works and how it affects them. And so moving forward, we're collaborating on, like the update to the code, and we're also building out some other programs. So some of the things that we've just released, we've done an equine transport, understanding Canada's transport of animals regulations. So this is a document that shows you, that helps you understand how the laws and regulations, provincially and federally, apply to transport, and that's this one over here. The second document, this actually, the equine transport one builds out more of section 8 of the code, which is the transportation section. And then the document right beside it here, the equine euthanasia, a humane end of life document, is the result of building out section 10 of the code. And that just helps people understand, owners who are dealing with end of life. It helps them know what the options are and helping them make their decision on end of life. And currently we're also working on an online horse hauling course. And so all our resources are available on our website. We have an area that's dedicated to the code of practice, and that's horsewelfare.ca. And so I think that's all I have. So thank you for listening to my presentation.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mikki. Our final presentation is by Cristina Wilkins. She is a PhD candidate at the University of New England. She is exploring the factors that influence welfare outcomes of human-to-horse interactions. Cristina sent us a pre-recorded video, so I encourage you to turn up your volume for this portion.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to tell you about a short online course teaching how to apply the 5 domains model in practice and in the context of sport and recreation horses. This is one of 2 industry-focused online short courses specifically developed to transform the welfare of sport and recreation horses, not just across Australia, but worldwide. and thanks to the University of New England's open learning platform. I created the welfare assessment course, and it is a self-paced course. It takes approximately 25 hours to complete. It is divided into 7 modules. The first half provides the foundational knowledge required to apply the model in practice, and all the content is delivered as a video presentation with the voiceover transcript, plus there are compulsory learning assessments. And the learning builds gradually, as the title suggests, leading to the practical application of the model. Towards the end, you have real case studies to assess in the form of edited videos showing a day in the life of 5 different horses. The case studies are real-world horses in a variety of contexts and disciplines. You get to apply the 5 domains-based welfare assessment checklist in the way you've learned in the course, and you can contrast your evaluations with those of other animal welfare experts, receiving feedback that includes the reasonings behind each decision. The course ends with a module meant to consider the ethical dimensions. It offers some strategies for ethical decision making with a special focus of making end-of-life decisions. So let's see who's been taking the course. We've had almost 200 people enroll from 17 different countries, and they cover many areas of the world. They are veterinarians, lecturers in animal welfare science, welfare officers for major racing and equestrian organizations, PhD students, researchers, equestrian coaches, but also just regular horse owners, and they are all recommending it to their friends. So far, word of mouth is the main marketing force behind the uptake. For professionals such as veterinarians and veterinary technicians and nurses and certified behavior consultants, the course is now accredited as a continuing education provider. It is RACE approved by all the veterinary boards in the US and Canada, and also recognized in New Zealand, Australia, Ireland, and the UK. But before I finish, I want to offer you a free copy of this 5 domains infographic that I created when I developed the course. It groups conditions and their associated experiences by domain and according to whether they tend to promote good welfare or they pose a risk. If you scan the code, you can get the poster sent to you by email so you can print it and display. And there are other free 5 domains based resources on the Horses and People website. So there you go. If you're interested in taking welfare to your barn, to your yard, to your horses, this is the course for you. Get in touch if you have any questions, and thank you for your interest in improving horse welfare.
For those people who didn't get their questions answered tonight, do make sure to come back again tomorrow so we can answer them all. Again, we appreciate all our sponsors, Ontario Equestrian, Schleisa Saddlery, Equine Guelph, and Mad Barn. Thank you for helping make this event possible. Don't go away just yet though. After our next little activity, you will find out how you can enter the giveaway for the Schleisa Saddlery free saddle fitting and the free Equine Guelph course, as well as receive the Mad Barn code for a free gift with purchase. We thank our speakers, Jackie Wepruk and Jeffrey Spooner, for their great insights on codes of practices, Francis Habile for moderating the evening, and our 3 educational content presenters, Gayle Ecker, Mikki Shatosky, and Cristina Wilkins. I now invite you all to go back to the first Menti through menti.com and enter the code on the screen, scan the QR code, or press the link in the chat to tell us what your comfort level is with the 2 statements that will show up on your screen. I'm glad to see that some people now feel familiar with the Equine Code of Practice and the impact it could have on your daily lives. Last question for you this evening. What are your key takeaways from this symposium? So there's lots of things to take away from the symposium, and I hope all of you learned something new today. Before you go, please answer the short feedback survey to find the code from Mad Barn for a free gift with purchase, as well as enter the giveaway for the Schleisa Saddlery free saddle fitting and the free Equine Guelph course. Scan the QR code or press the link in the chat to access the survey. Be sure to tune in again tomorrow as we delve into how horse welfare is approached on a global scale during a panel discussion with Bronte Forbes from the Hong Kong Jockey Club, Sally Taylor from the British Horse Racing Authority, Bettina Bobsian from the National Farm Animal Care Council, and Sonia Keating from the United States Equestrian Federation. Ask all your burning questions and explore how equine welfare practices differ in other countries. If you have not done so already, it is not too late to register for tomorrow's session, so please go to the link in the chat or scan the QR code on the screen to register. If you'd like to rewatch the symposium in the future, recordings will be available on the BBRM YouTube channel in the next few weeks. We will now keep the Zoom on for the next couple of minutes to allow everyone to complete the survey and register for tomorrow's session. We hope to see you there and thank you all for coming today.